My son-in-law grabbed my daughter by the hair in front of me in a crowded restaurant. His father even clapped and cheered him on. My daughter lowered her head, tears streaming silently. When I saw that she did not fight back, I knew this was not the first time. Welcome back to Dad's real-life revenge. Grab a glass of water, a few snacks, sit back comfortably, hit subscribe, and leave comment number 1 so we can begin the story. The smell of perfectly cooked steak mixed with the aroma of expensive red wine should have been the sign of a perfect dinner. But at the table shared by the Caldwell family and the Miller family, the air felt so heavy it was as if someone had poured molten lead into my lungs. The dazzling crystal chandelier above us only made the cruel contrast below even clearer. My daughter Daria sat there with her shoulders trembling. She had just ordered a bottle of Pinot Noir instead of the Cabernet Sauvignon her husband preferred. A small mistake, a simple slip that anyone could have ignored. But Baldrick Miller did not. Why would he do something like that? Pride. The fragile pride of a man in front of an audience. And that pride was paid for with the physical and emotional pain of my daughter. He did not shout. He smiled, a cold smile sharp as a surgical blade. He reached out his hand. For a moment I thought he was going to comfort his wife. But no. Baldrick grabbed a fistful of Daria's hair at the back of her head and yanked it hard. Her head snapped backward. Her eyes widened in terror as she stared up at the ceiling. The sound of her scalp being pulled tight echoed clearly in the silence. No one moved. Not a single person stood up to defend the woman being hurt. It was a painful reminder of how indifferent people can be. Instead of acting, they looked away. They chose to ignore the violence, so they could preserve their fake sense of politeness. But the most horrifying part came next. Robert Miller, Baldrick's father, slowly set down his wine glass. Then he began clapping with smug satisfaction. His hoarse, commanding voice cut through the room. "Good job, son. A woman needs to know her place. You have to teach her who the master of the house is." It was unbelievable that in this day and age there were still people who raised their children to stand above humanity, human rights, and the law itself. I felt my blood boiling, my ears burning hot. Robert ignored the look in my eyes. He glanced around the restaurant at the other diners, as if hoping they would applaud his display of strength, as if he were demonstrating absolute power. Daria did not resist. That was the part that shattered my heart the most. She did not cry out for help. She did not push his hand away. She just sat there like a broken doll. She avoided my eyes, and I could feel her fear doubling. She was afraid I would be hurt by what I was seeing. I knew that about her. She had always loved me more than anyone. Tears rolled down her cheeks and soaked into the pure white tablecloth, leaving dark stains behind. He released her hair and calmly wiped his hands with a napkin, as if he had just touched something dirty. Baldrick leaned closer and whispered into Daria's ear, but loudly enough for me to hear. "Next time, do not embarrass me in front of my father. You already know the consequences." I gripped the fork in my hand so tightly that my knuckles turned white. A voice in my head shouted, "Edward, throw the plate straight at his face, that son-in-law of yours. He does not deserve anything better." But I forced myself to hold back. I could not behave like an animal the way my son-in-law did. I needed a plan. I needed to take everything back for my daughter step by step. The same daughter I had taught 15 years ago that the world was a beautiful place. I taught her how to build strong structures. I taught her that love was a safe harbor. But I had been wrong. Her love was real. Everything else was not. I had pushed her into a glass prison where the guards wore expensive suits and drank wine worth thousands of dollars. Then Daria's eyes flicked toward me for just a brief second. There was no plea for help in them. Only a vast emptiness, a deep despair, followed by a small shake of her head telling me not to say anything. As if something was threatening her, something that made her too afraid to ask for help. But the anger rising inside me was not like a flash of straw fire. It was a nuclear reactor silently building pressure. I looked straight into Baldrick's eyes. He was still chewing his steak with satisfaction. Then I turned to Robert, who was nodding proudly at his son. They thought my silence meant submission. They believed the money and power of the Miller family could hide the bruises on my daughter's soul. What they did not know was that from the moment that slap landed not with a hand but with humiliation, I had already declared war. Justice may arrive slowly, but that does not mean it arrives gently. I drove home in a bitter daze. The image of Daria being yanked by the hair at the dinner table kept replaying in my mind like a broken film loop. To stop myself from turning the car around and doing something reckless, I forced my thoughts back to the old days. The days when Daria's world was made of wood shavings and the smell of glue. My Daria had always been an unusually sweet child. While other girls asked for dolls, she asked me to take her to buy a handsaw and pieces of pine wood. She did not build castles for princesses. She built houses for birds. With bright, shining eyes, she told me dad, birds need a safe place to return to when it rains. That was her natural kindness. Those little birdhouses became the symbol of her childhood. Daria would carefully hammer in each tiny nail. She would sand every corner smooth so that delicate wings would not get scratched. Back then I was so proud. I believed I was raising a brilliant architect, a woman who could create safe and warm spaces for the whole world. And yet now my daughter was the one trapped inside a luxurious glass prison, a place with surveillance cameras and strict rules but not a single trace of safety. She grew up and became a real architect, just as she had dreamed. I still remember the day she received her honors degree. Daria stood on the stage confident and radiant. She had skillful hands and a sharp mind. She could design towering skyscrapers, but her heart always stayed rooted in one core value: protection. That was why I trusted her completely when she brought Baldric home. He was also from the upper class. He understood art and carried himself like an educated gentleman. His words and ideas seemed perfectly in tune with my daughter's. I thought those two kindred spirits would build a home stronger than any birdhouse she had ever made. But I was wrong. Wrong because I focused too much on the polished exterior and forgot to inspect the foundation of the man who would become my daughter's husband. I forgot that the people capable of building the grandest structures are sometimes the same ones who can be the most ruthless destroyers of the people closest to them. Now, whenever I close my eyes, I no longer see the little girl holding a small hammer. I see a thin woman with trembling shoulders. A woman who once wanted to protect every bird from the rain, yet now cannot shield herself from the storms of emotional and physical abuse. How could such a strong and talented woman become so afraid? Why did she not run to me in that moment? That question haunted me. I stopped the car in front of my house. The silence of the night tightened around my throat. I walked into my study and pulled out Daria's old drawings. Among the stacks of certificates and drafts, I found a small photograph buried deep inside a drawer. It was a photo of Daria and Baldric on their wedding day. I picked up a magnifying glass and studied the corner of the photo carefully. A detail I had overlooked 3 years ago. A detail that sent a chill down my spine. In that moment, I realized something. What happened tonight was not an accident. It had begun long before that dinner ever took place, and this photograph was proof that Baldric had never loved my daughter the way I believed he did the first time she brought him home. I studied the wedding photo through the lens. While Daria was smiling brightly with a bouquet of lily of the valley in her hands, Baldric was not looking at her. He was staring straight into the camera. There was not a trace of warmth in his eyes. It was the gaze of a hunter who had just captured a rare prize. A cruel, possessive look. I had placed my daughter's hand in his and told him to take care of her. He answered, "With my life." I had no idea it was a threat, not a promise. Looking back now, I began to realize that something had always been wrong. After that lavish wedding, Baldric slowly revealed his true nature as a master manipulator. He started with advice that sounded caring. He said architecture was too stressful for a delicate woman like Daria. He convinced her that designing buildings would wear down her beauty. He wanted her to stay home and enjoy the luxury he provided. At first, Daria refused. She loved her drawings. She loved the feeling of creating safe spaces. But Baldric was persistent. He began staging situations that made her feel guilty. He pretended to be sick whenever she had to travel for work. He created pointless arguments just so he could later hold her and whisper, "See, only I truly care about you. The world out there only wants to use your talent." Little by little, my daughter quit her job. She abandoned her dreams of birdhouses and locked herself inside a magnificent but lonely mansion. He controlled every expense, no matter how small. My proud architect daughter now had to ask her husband for money for every personal item. Last summer, when I visited them, we sat outside in the garden under the blazing heat of 35 degrees. I noticed Daria wearing a long-sleeved turtleneck sweater. Sweat dotted her forehead, yet she never took it off. When I asked, she forced a smile and said, "I just have a slight cold, Dad." But when she reached out to pour tea, the sleeve slipped down slightly. I caught a glimpse of a dark purple bruise on her wrist, a clear handprint. At the time, I did not think much of it. I assumed she had simply bumped into something. Now I remember what happened next. Baldric walked out of the house. He placed his hand heavily on Daria's shoulder. His fingers pressed exactly where the bruise was. My daughter's face turned pale with pain, but she forced herself to endure it so I would not notice. He looked at me and smiled. You see, Dad, Daria is a bit clumsy. She falls quite often. I have to take very good care of her. His control did not stop at her body. He attacked her mind as well. He told her she was not good enough to be a mother. He told her that without him she would be nothing but a failure. He used luxury as chains. He used fear as walls. I had always wondered why Daria stayed, why she did not run away when the door was still open. Then suddenly I understood. Baldric had built such a sophisticated system of manipulation that my daughter truly believed she was the one at fault. She believed she deserved to be treated that way. I turned the wedding photo over and saw a small line written in red ink on the back. Those words made me realize that this was not just ordinary domestic abuse. It was a contract Daria had secretly signed to protect me. To protect me. I never imagined that her love for me would force her to endure so much suffering. I stood up and looked out the window. Rain had begun to fall. Tears suddenly streamed down my face. I knew I could not stand by and watch for even one more second. I had to act. But just as I reached for my car keys, my phone vibrated. An anonymous message had arrived attached to a short audio recording. The voice in that recording was Baldric's, and what I heard shattered my heart completely. Rain pounded against the windows of my office. I opened the recording I had just received. Baldric's voice came through the speaker. It was no longer the polite tone he used when speaking to me. It sounded metallic and razor sharp. If you dare tell your father about this, I will destroy his career and reputation overnight. You know I can do that, Daria. The recording ended with a choked sob. It was Daria. My daughter was being used to threaten me, and I was being used to control her. Baldric had turned our love into a weapon against us. Fragments of memory began to fall into place. The times I visited their house without warning. Daria would always appear startled and nervous. She spent far too long cleaning things that were already spotless. She apologized constantly, even if it was only a single drop of water on the floor. Whenever the sound of Baldric's car engine echoed outside the gate, her entire body would stiffen. Her eyes would lock on the door as if she were staring at a monster about to awaken. It was horrifying. A father should have recognized this long ago. I should never have allowed my daughter to live in physical and emotional torment for so long. I blamed myself for being such a careless father, living comfortably and blindly while my daughter protected me with a love as deep as the ocean. My Daria now lived like a bird with its wings cut off inside a golden cage. She feared everything. She even feared the sound of her own breathing, afraid it might disturb Baldric's artificial silence. She became obsessed with pleasing him. She tried to be perfect so she would not be punished. But for people like Baldric, a victim's perfection only becomes another excuse to increase their cruelty. I looked at myself in the mirror. An old father with white hair and hollow eyes stared back at me. I felt like a coward. I had taught my daughter how to build houses, but I never taught her how to tear down the walls that were suffocating her. I had left her alone to face this monster for 3 years. I picked up my phone. My hands were still shaking. I had to act. Strangely, just as I was about to do something, I glanced at the security monitor that showed the front gate of my house. A familiar black car was parked quietly across the road. It was not Baldric's car. It belonged to Robert Miller, his father. Why was he here at this hour? Why was he watching my house? A terrible thought flashed through my mind. Perhaps Baldric was not the only one controlling this game. Perhaps a much bigger secret was hidden behind the walls of the Miller family. I stepped toward the door, but suddenly a yellow envelope slid through the gap under my front door. There was no sender's name on it. Only 4 hurriedly written words. Save Matthew. I stood frozen, staring at the yellow envelope lying alone on the wooden floor. The 4 words, Save Matthew, struck my heart like knives. Matthew was my grandson. He was only 4 years old. He was everything Daria still had to hold on to in this life. I tore the envelope open. My hands trembled so badly, I almost dropped the stack of papers inside. Inside was a bundle of photographs. Not wedding photos. Not pictures of a happy family. They were close-up images of injuries. Dark bruises on an arm. Long scratches across a back. And the most cruel of all was a photograph of Daria clutching Matthew tightly in a dark corner of a room. My daughter's face looked hollow. Her eyes were empty like those of a ghost. I collapsed into a chair. Rage exploded inside me until my vision blurred. I could not wait another second. I drove like a madman, ignoring the black car, watching from outside my gate, racing straight toward the Miller mansion. The luxurious house appeared in the darkness like a giant tomb. I burst inside. Baldric was not there. I found Daria in a narrow laundry room in the basement. She was frantically scrubbing one of Baldric's shirts. When she heard me, she jumped and fell to the floor. Instinctively, she pulled down the sleeves of her sweater to hide the wounds I had just seen in the photographs. "Daria, come home with me right now," I roared. I grabbed her arm to pull her with me. But Daria pushed me away. She shook her head violently. Tears streamed down her pale face. "I cannot leave, Dad. You do not understand. He will kill you. He said if I leave you will go to prison for the debts he arranged." I pulled my daughter into my arms and whispered to her, "I do not matter. My reputation and my money mean nothing compared to your life. Come home, Daria." But she pushed me away again. She looked up at the ceiling where the red lights of the surveillance cameras blinked like the eyes of demons. "He is watching us, Dad. He sees everything." Through sobs, Daria told me the truth. Baldric did not only beat her. He forced her to photograph her injuries every day as a reminder of her failure. He told her they were proof that she was a bad wife, a mother incapable of caring for her child. His manipulation had gone so far that my daughter believed the abuse was punishment she deserved for her own clumsiness. I knelt in front of her. I begged her to stand up for Matthew. But fear had rooted itself deep inside Daria's bones. She looked like an architect who had just watched the entire structure of her life collapse, and no longer had the strength to pick up even one brick. Then in that moment of despair, I noticed something. A tiny memory card hidden beneath the insole of Matthew's small shoe by the door. Daria saw where my eyes had gone. She gave a faint nod. That was everything she had secretly prepared in the shadows. I slipped the memory card into my pocket. I had to leave before Baldric returned. But as I stepped toward the living room window, I saw a figure standing in the garden outside. Robert Miller. He was watching me. He did not call the police. He did not try to stop me. He simply stood there in the rain with a strange smile on his lips. Slowly, he lifted his phone and showed me a message he had just sent. The recipient was Baldric. The message contained only 3 words. "The rat is trapped." In that instant, I realized I had made a terrible mistake, coming here alone. This was not a house. It was a stage prepared in advance to destroy me. At that exact moment, the roar of Baldric's car engine echoed outside the gate. Headlights swept across the windows like the fiery eyes of death. I was trapped between 2 generations of tyrants from the Miller family, and in my pocket was the only piece of evidence that could set my daughter free. The headlights swept across the living room like blades of light, cutting the darkness in half. Baldric's engine went silent. The stillness that followed was more terrifying than the roar of the car moments before. I could feel my heart pounding wildly in my chest. Daria stood frozen in the middle of the room, trembling so badly she could barely stay on her feet. I quickly pushed the memory card deep into the lining of my wallet. I looked around. There was no escape. This house was a masterpiece of imprisonment. Every window was reinforced glass that could not be opened from the inside. In every corner of the walls, tiny cameras blinked with glowing red lights. They were watching me, recording every desperate breath of a father on the edge. Baldric's footsteps echoed steadily along the stone walkway outside. Click. The electronic lock disengaged. Baldric walked in. He was still wearing the same immaculate suit from the restaurant. He looked at me, then at Daria. A faint smile appeared on his lips as he casually removed his watch and placed it on the table. "Busy night for you, Dad, I imagine," Baldric said calmly, his voice low and disturbingly composed. "Did you come here to inspect the safety of the house?" He pulled out his phone and turned the screen toward me. Camera number 4. I saw myself kneeling in front of Daria in the basement only minutes earlier. I saw myself hiding the memory card in my pocket. Every single movement had been streamed directly to his phone. Baldric stepped closer to me. He was half a head taller. The the scent of expensive cologne mixed with the cold smell of rain. He leaned in and whispered, "You think you are saving her? No. You are only making things worse. Every step you take inside this house has a price." Suddenly he turned toward Daria. She shrank instantly. Baldric gently stroked her pale cheek. "Do not worry, my love. Your father and I are just discussing architecture." At that moment my phone vibrated violently inside my jacket pocket. A message from Baldric's number appeared even while he was standing right in front of me. I opened it. It was a photograph taken from above. In the image I saw myself standing in the living room, and a small infrared red dot was resting directly on my left chest. Baldric looked at me with empty eyes and smiled. "You see, Dad, I do not even need to touch you. I have eyes everywhere. And my father, Robert, well, he enjoys dramatic performances. You should leave before the show truly begins." I looked out the window. Robert was still standing there in the rain. In his hand he held a small remote device. In that moment I realized something terrifying. This house was not only Daria's prison. It was a trap designed for anyone who dared to break the order of the Miller family. I had no choice but to walk out the door in complete helplessness. But as I stepped through the gate, Robert approached me and whispered quietly in my ear, "Do not look at that memory card while you are still in the car. Wait until you get home, if you do not want to see something that might drive you insane." I drove away, but my mind was completely shattered. Why would Robert warn me? And why at that exact moment did I notice a strange scent drifting from the back seat of my car? I glanced into the rearview mirror. A small figure was curled up beneath my coat in the back seat. Matthew, my grandson. When had he gotten into my car? And in his tiny hands was a small recorder playing the sound of a woman sobbing. But the voice was not Daria's. I pulled the car into a dark alley. My breathing was heavy. Matthew was asleep in the back seat, curled up like a wounded little bird. The recorder in his hand was still playing faint, murmuring sounds. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The voice was not Daria's. It was Jessica, the nanny who had suddenly quit a month ago without a word. Jessica's voice in the recording was filled with fear. "Mr. Caldwell, if you are hearing this, it means I succeeded in getting Matthew out. I could not take it anymore. I saw what Baldric was doing. Not only to Miss Daria, he is turning Matthew into a monster just like him." A chill ran through my body. Jessica described a horrifying afternoon. Baldric forced Matthew to stand and watch as he choked Daria in the middle of the living room. Then he told the 4-year-old boy, "Look carefully, Matthew. This is how a man teaches someone who disobeys. If you do not want your mother to get hurt, you must tell your father every time she cries or calls your grandfather." He turned my grandson into an informant. He poisoned the soul of a child with violence and betrayal. I looked at Matthew in the rearview mirror. A child who should have grown up protected, surrounded by birdhouses and kindness. Instead, he was carrying the weight of a crime he did not even understand. Jessica had also left a digital photo on the memory card I had taken. I opened it on my phone. My heart nearly stopped. Baldric was gripping Daria's throat with both hands. My daughter's face had turned purple. Her eyes bulged from lack of oxygen. And in the corner of the image stood Matthew. The boy was not crying. His face showed a terrifying emptiness. The toxic masculinity of the Miller family was like a virus. It spread from Robert to Baldric and now to Matthew. Suddenly I understood why Robert had been smiling in the rain. He was proud of it. To him, violence was the family legacy. My hands tightened around the steering wheel. My anger was no longer an explosion. It was a cold plan forming in silence. I would not only get Daria out of that house, I would burn the entire Miller empire to the ground. I would prove to Robert that the protection of a father is stronger than any cruel form of possession. At that moment, Matthew stirred and woke up. He looked at me with those same empty eyes. He did not say Grandpa. He looked straight at me and said something that froze my spine. "Dad said if Grandpa takes me away, he will make Mom disappear forever." My phone vibrated again. A video call. From Daria. I answered, but the face on the screen was not my daughter's. It was a live view of their bedroom. Daria was chained by the wrists to the bed frame. Baldric stood beside the nightstand holding a bottle of wine. He looked directly into the camera and spoke calmly. "You have 15 minutes to bring Matthew back. Otherwise, I will show you what the architecture of real collapse looks like. My mind went blank. Why was I suddenly so confused, unable to decide what to do? Would calling the police even save the situation? Only now did I understand why in crime stories the victims who are being manipulated often do not call the police. I looked at Matthew. Then at the screen. Time was counting down. I realized there was no way back. What should I do when faced with a choice between my daughter's freedom and my grandson's safety? 15 minutes. That was all the time I had before Baldric turned his threat into reality. Rain hammered the roof of the car like the ticking of a death clock. I looked at Matthew. The boy sat motionless. He did not cry. He did not ask for his mother. He simply stared into the void with the emptiness Baldric had planted inside him. I could not take Matthew back to that hell. But I could not abandon Daria either. I pressed the gas pedal. The car shot forward into the white blur of rain. At first I headed toward the central police station. But when I was only 2 blocks away, my phone lit up again. This time it was a voice message from Daria. Her voice was hoarse, strangled. Dad, I'm pregnant. The world around me collapsed. A new life was growing inside that hell. Baldric knew it, and he was using it to deepen the torture. He did not want a child. He wanted another sacrifice. I turned the car around immediately. I would not wait for the police. I could not wait for paperwork while my daughter's life and my grandson's safety were measured in seconds. I drove straight toward the Miller estate. The car smashed through the iron gate with a violent crash. I did not stop until the front of the car slammed into the massive oak door. I burst inside. The smell of wine filled the air. Baldric stood at the top of the staircase. His face twisted with excitement. He laughed loudly. The old man has finally lost his mind. Do you think you're the hero? Then I saw Daria. She was crawling out of the bedroom wearing a thin nightgown soaked with sweat and tears. When she saw me, she screamed. Dad, run, he's gone crazy. Baldric lunged forward. He grabbed Daria by the throat right in front of me. His grip tightened as he forced her against the staircase railing. I rushed toward them, but Robert Miller stepped out of the darkness and blocked my path. Look, Edward, Robert shouted. Look at my son teaching his wife. This is real strength. At that moment, thunder exploded across the sky. Lightning illuminated Daria's terrified face. With the last strength she had left, she grabbed a porcelain vase from a nearby shelf. Crash. The vase shattered against Baldric's head. Stunned, he loosened his grip. Daria did not hesitate. She shoved him backward down the stairs and ran toward me. Run, she screamed. I shoved Robert aside. We ran out of the house into the pouring rain. Daria grabbed Matthew from the back seat of the car. She ran barefoot across the sharp stone driveway, not even feeling the pain. The fear of being caught was greater than anything else. We jumped into the car. I slammed the accelerator. Behind us, the lights of the Miller mansion faded into the storm. Daria held Matthew tightly in her arms. Her whole body trembled. He won't stop, Dad. Both of them. They're insane. I glanced at my daughter. Her face was covered with fresh bruises. Dark red fingerprints marked her neck. I reached over and held her hand. It was ice cold. Don't be afraid. I have the evidence now. But just as I was about to drive toward the hospital, a large truck suddenly burst out of a dark alley. It did not brake. It came straight for the passenger side where Daria was sitting. The sound of metal tearing through the night exploded around us. Our car was thrown violently aside and flipped over. Through my fading consciousness, I saw Robert Miller step out of the truck. He was holding a gasoline can. He did not look at me. His eyes were fixed on the memory card lying on the wet road. I tried to move, but my legs were trapped. Daria was not moving. Matthew was screaming, and Robert struck the lighter. The smell of gasoline filled the air. I hung upside down in my seatbelt. The world had turned into a blur of muddy red. Robert Miller walked closer. The flame from the Zippo lighter in his hand danced like a small demon. He picked up the memory card lying in the rainwater and slipped it calmly into his pocket. It's over, Edward, Robert said coldly. You should have accepted your place. But he was wrong. He had grown so arrogant in his power that he forgot one thing. An architect always has backup plans. Just before I returned to the mansion, I had already synchronized all the data from the memory card to cloud storage. The card in his pocket meant nothing now. And that was not all. Jessica had secretly installed a dash camera and recorded every conversation inside the Miller house for an entire month. Fate had not abandoned us. The sound of police sirens echoed in the distance. Red and blue lights tore through the night. Robert's expression changed instantly. He had never expected that Jessica had already called the police before leaving. Officers rushed in. Robert was restrained on the spot. Baldrick was taken out of the mansion shortly after his body wrapped in bandages. 6 months later, the trial took place under the intense attention of the public. I sat in the front row. Daria sat beside me, wearing a simple black suit. The scar on her neck had faded, but the pain in her eyes was still there. Baldrick sat at the defendant's table. The arrogance of the rich heir was gone. His hands trembled as the recordings were played in court. His shouting, Daria begging, and the most painful sound of all was Matthew screaming as he watched his mother being beaten. The courtroom fell silent. Some people began to cry. Baldrick's lawyer tried to argue that it was only a family conflict. They claimed Daria suffered from psychological problems. But when the evidence of Baldrick installing surveillance cameras throughout the house was presented, every lie collapsed. It was never a home. It was an electronic prison. The judge struck the gavel. Baldrick Miller was sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated assault and severe domestic abuse. Robert Miller did not escape justice either. He was charged as an accomplice and for obstructing justice. In an unexpected moment, Robert asked to speak before the hearing ended. He looked toward us. Late tears rolled down his aged face. "I'm sorry," he said, "but those words could never repair the scars carved into my daughter's soul." Justice had been served. Baldrick would pay behind bars. Daria was finally free. Matthew began psychological treatment to erase the darkness from his childhood memories. I thought everything had finally come to an end. But as we stepped out of the courthouse, a strange man approached Daria. He handed her an old worn envelope. Daria's face turned pale the moment she saw the seal on it. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "Dad." Baldrick wasn't the first one. Another woman disappeared before I moved into that house, and she left this for me. Inside the envelope was not a farewell letter. It was a secret will, a document proving Baldrick had seized a massive fortune from his previous wife, a wife whose police file claimed she had died in a car accident. But the photograph attached to the document revealed a completely different truth. 3 years have passed since the shadow of the Miller family faded away. I stand before a special building in the heart of the city. It is not a luxurious tower. It is a shelter for women and children who have survived domestic abuse. Daria designed it. My daughter has returned to her drawings. But this time she is not building birdhouses. She is building fortresses for life. The building is designed with wide windows that welcome sunlight. Light fills every corner. There are no surveillance cameras, no dark corners hiding fear. Daria stands there without the long-sleeved sweaters she used to wear in the summer. She is confident in a professional suit, the scar on her neck hidden beneath a blue silk scarf, the color of hope. Never confuse possession with love. Daria learned that lesson in the most painful way possible. Now she uses her talent to make sure no one else has to endure what she went through. Matthew has changed too. The boy is playing in the garden. The emptiness in his eyes is gone. The innocence has returned. I look at my daughter and feel something close to purification. We lost many things, but we found ourselves again. The punishment for the Miller father and son was necessary. But Daria's rebirth is my true victory. Justice is not only about putting monsters behind bars. Justice is when the victim can smile again and walk forward under the sunlight. And yet the past always finds a way to remind us. Baldrick's first wife, the poor woman who disappeared, left behind an unexpected legacy. The fortune he stole from her was recovered, and Daria used every dollar of it to build this center. She may no longer be here, but her spirit is honored in every brick Daria placed. I step closer and take my daughter's hand. "I'm proud of you," I whisper. Daria looks at me. Her smile shines brighter than the morning sun. If you've followed the story all the way to this point, and it touched your heart, please do us a small favor. Subscribe. Many people watch without doing it, but it costs you nothing and means a great deal to us. I turn and begin walking toward my car, but a taxi suddenly stops in front of the center's gate. A woman steps out. She wears dark sunglasses that cover half her face. She walks toward me and slowly lowers them. My heart stops again. That face. It is the face of the woman in the photograph. Baldric's first wife. The woman who was declared dead 10 years ago. She places a letter in my hand and quickly walks away. The letter contains only one sentence. Your war is not over yet, Edward, because Robert Miller was never the true head of this empire.